So in case you haven't noticed, the whole rage beats and whole lot of red sound, they're out. For the new Carti sound, we're basically just going back to old Atlanta trap beats. Simple, bouncy, with a ton of room for vocals. So I'm just gonna go over a couple of the beats that I've made that I think fit the new Carti sound, and give you guys a few tips and tricks that I like to think about as I'm making these types of beats. I made these beats in Ableton, but you can easily use these tips in FL or any other DAW that you use. If you're interested in why I've been using Ableton instead of FL recently, I made a video about that I'll link up in the corner. I made these 3 beats from scratch during my live streams. So if you want to see my production process step by step in more detail, I'll link the full streams in the description. So first things first is sample selection. Sample selection is super important for every beat that you make. You always want to be using high quality samples. All the sounds in these beats are either coming from my new Prophecy collection, which is a drum kit, one-shot kit, Serum presets, and analog lab bank. And a few of the sounds are also coming from my free Genesis multi-kit. You can get both of those at tonetreat.co. I think it's important to have samples that are not just the most generic sounds. You want to have the same impact and punch as, let's say, the Spins 808, but if you're just using the exact same Spins 808 as everybody else, your beats are not going to stand out as much and you're just going to blend in. You want to have that same punch and impact, but with like a unique flavor or character. That's why I made Tone Treat in the first place. So once you got good sample selection, I would say the next 2 most important parts are going to be the 808 pattern and just kind of the simplicity of the beat. Carti beats now are tending to be very simple. You don't need a ton of crazy melodies and insane piercing lead sounds. It's just really about cultivating a cool bouncy vibe and giving him the space to flow on top. I've been doing just about 2 or 3 melodies or chords with some fairly simple sounds that don't take up too much space in the mix. Once I've got a pretty cool, simple melody down, I like to switch over to the 808 pattern. Sometimes I program the 808 over just a 2-step hi-hat pattern, but a lot of times I'll kind of just be making the melody and start hearing what I want the 808 to do. So I kind of already have it in my head as I'm making the melody, so then I can just program it right after the melody. It's really just kind of circumstantial and whatever you're hearing at the moment. With these videos, I really want to touch more on how to really learn and become a better producer and the big picture ideas and sort of the mindset behind everything, instead of just teaching you like the technical thing and you just copy what I do and don't really learn anything. Because every time you make a beat, you're going to do things slightly differently. You really just have to experiment and try new techniques and see which works best for you and your workflow. So I'm really trying to make this a video where you can learn and explore and try new things for yourself, instead of just like,
oh, well, if you turn this knob to 42% here and then put the kick right here and the snare has to go right here all the time and this is the rule for this and that. And
that's only really helpful to you and your growth as a producer if you understand why you're doing all of those things. So for the 808 pattern, I like to keep them simple yet bouncy. I don't know exactly how to describe it. I just kind of like going from high notes to low notes or low notes to high notes. I just kind of think of it, I guess, in my head as like you're bouncing up and down from like between the octaves, I guess, and that kind of makes the beat feel more bouncy. I don't go too crazy with hi-hat rolls or anything typically. If anything, I'll just do it sort of towards the end of the phrase at turnarounds and stuff like that. Another thing to experiment with too is switching up 808 patterns in the beat while keeping the melodies the same. For 808 switches, I like to either add a couple notes or take a few notes away, depending on the complexity of the original pattern. And if it's kind of bouncing between the octaves like I was talking about, sometimes I'll just bring the higher notes down to the root note, and that way there's just less jumping back and forth. So it's just a little more consistent on one note. So as I was preparing for this video and trying to kind of put all the subconscious thoughts I have while making beats into words that other people can learn from, I was just kind of realizing essentially everything just boils down to the relationship between all the different elements of the song. So for the hi-hats, open hats, percs, snare rolls, you know, all those different elements, you can't really think of them as individual elements on their own. You kind of have to think about their relationship to each other and how they all work together. And really that goes for everything else in the song as well. Melodies, 808s, snares, vocals, everything. So if you have more of just a simple two-step hi-hat pattern or something, you can go a bit more crazy with perc sounds, open hats, and snare rolls to kind of fill that space. But you know, if you have crazy melody with a million different notes and you have a ton of 808 rolls and snare rolls everywhere, if you stack all those complex elements on top of each other, it's just going to get way too chaotic. So you kind of want to think about this stuff consciously as you're making beats. You know, okay, well, I have 5 hi-hat rolls. Maybe I don't add a perc roll and 3 more open hats on top of that. Kind of think about that type of stuff consciously at first, and eventually you're just gonna kind of start to do it subconsciously without even thinking. But for most of these new Carti beats, I just keep the hi-hat really simple. Just a 2-step 8th note hi-hat. Sometimes I'll add little lower notes or minimal rolls, especially like a lower triplet roll or something just at the end of the phrase. So if you put some of these techniques into practice, you can make beats that sound like this. And again, my goal with these videos is really teaching you the skills to develop how to think about things and kind of your mindset as a producer, and not so focused on teaching you the exact technical details of what you should do and the exact formula to follow for every single beat. And I think that's the trick to really becoming like fluent as a producer, is knowing why you're doing the things that you're doing. If that's something you think is cool, join the Discord or let me know in the comments, and let me know what else you guys are struggling with so I could try to help you out. I just see a lot of really bad advice on YouTube tutorials. The people mean well, but they don't really know what they're doing that much or why they're doing it. So the cycle of just the blind leading the blind kind of just keeps happening, and we must break the cycle.